Hi, welcome to I Forgive You. Now what? Be free from the burden of unforgiveness. This is a 5-part women's Bible study on the topic of forgiveness, and these videos are rather brief. They're designed to guide discussion. Now, if you're doing this Bible study on your own, that is perfectly fine. That is great. Just make sure you pause at the right moments to answer questions and record your thoughts and reflect on things. If you're doing this study in a group, also great. You'll want to pause at certain points too so you can discuss what you wrote down and everybody's thoughts, examples, experiences on this. So the reason I created this study, so before I even began working on it, I just felt I had a problem in this area. At the start of the study, or actually before I began making it, I wrote down the names of who I was holding bitterness towards. Now, I don't recommend that you do this unless you can be certain no one's going to find that list. Or if you write it down, look at it, and then immediately destroy it because you don't want anybody to find that list. But I did write it down because I felt like I needed to see it. It was all up in my head and I just didn't really understand the extent of the problem. And I was shocked at the number of names that I had written down. Some of these people I hadn't even formally declared forgiveness towards. And God commands that we forgive. So some of them I hadn't even done that. Even the ones that I had, my daily actions and words were not showing that to be the case. So I had a problem. I didn't want to gloss over this command from God that is so important. I didn't want to live in bitterness and hate. So then the question became, how? I've said I forgive you, but then what? I don't feel like I've forgiven this person. Or, should I do something other than saying I forgive you? So we are going to talk about a lot of things related to forgiveness here. We're going to talk about how it looks, how it feels, and what it is for real. We're going to talk about unforgiveness. We're going to talk about how to identify unforgiveness. We're going to talk about why to forgive, how to forgive. There's a good one. We're also going to talk about some other things toward the end, such as justice, trust, boundaries, repeat offenders. So at the start of this, or what I should say is before this Bible study begins, you should have completed assignment 1 if you were doing this as a group. If you're doing this on your own and you didn't realize yet that there was an assignment to be done, that's okay. Go ahead and pause here and complete the assignment, and then you can pick up the video afterwards or tomorrow. The assignment was to read and reflect on John 8:3 through 12, the adulterous woman, and then to select one of these stories below. So you could have selected Esau and Jacob, or you could have selected the story of Joseph and his brothers. If you were feeling ambitious, maybe you read both. That's fine. So this was the assignment 1. So the first step in forgiveness is changing our mindsets. We are fooled by our surroundings as to what forgiveness is and what it is not. So for us to make any progress here, we have to understand the real definition. What is forgiveness really? So we have to work on changing our mindset, and that's what week 1 is all about. I want you to take your notepads. If you're doing this alone, get out your notepad. If you're doing this in a group, same thing. Write down, what does the world tell us forgiveness is? This can be positive things, negative things, just whatever you think the world conveys to us, our society, our culture, of what forgiveness is. Also write down in a second list, what do you think forgiveness is? So what do you think the world tells you it is? What do you think it is? You might reflect on your assignment 1 readings, or you might just jot down the first words that come to mind. You might be just listening to your gut or your heart and just jotting down the first things that come to mind. Go ahead and pause the video here. Give everybody a minute or two to write down some words, and then you can resume the video. Welcome back. So you probably wrote down some of these words, maybe a lot of them, and you probably came up with some on your own, and that is great. What the world often tells us forgiveness is weakness, defeat, foolishness, that you're being naive, that forgiveness means you've accepted the other person's behavior or offense towards you, or that you're going to just forget it entirely, or that you've given up. Sometimes the world, though, tells us that forgiveness is friendship, meaning that you've forgiven, so now everything's good, you're all friends again. The world will tell you that forgiveness is healthy, impressive, commendable. And I know there's some things on here that contradict one another, but the world is contradicting in what they claim that forgiveness is. So sometimes forgiveness can be greeted with ridicule or even jealousy. And sometimes it might even be demanded. You ever have somebody apologize to you, but you're angry, and then they get angry at you for being angry, and they feel like you have no right to be still angry and not be forgiving me right now. Now, what forgiveness really is, it is peace. Peace is so important. Paul says it is one of the pieces of the armor of God. And you may want to pause right here and have someone volunteer to read Ephesians 6:15 so you can see what I'm talking about. Peace is release. It is release of resentment and debt. It doesn't mean a lack of justice, and we will touch on that in a later lesson. Forgiveness is freedom from pain and being controlled. It is letting go of the burden. And you may be thinking, what burden? The burden of the problem. Unforgiveness is a burden to you. Forgiveness is positive speech. And what does that mean? That means no gossip, no complaining, no hurtful words. Forgiveness is a stronger relationship with God and greater character for ourselves. And we will be reading some verses in the next assignment over the next week that touch on what that means. What do you mean a stronger relationship with God? What do you mean greater character for ourselves? There's going to be a lot in the upcoming verses that help us understand that. So do any of these things above reflect weakness or defeat or foolishness? Not at all. In fact, forgiveness is healthy. We will talk about later too how forgiveness defines the relationship. A lot of times when you forgive someone, that doesn't necessarily mean you go back to just being good friends or that everything stays the same. Forgiveness can mean a new definition to the relationship. So we will talk about that later. But go ahead and stop here. And everyone can share what they wrote down, they felt the world thought forgiveness is, and what they thought that forgiveness was. And compare notes. Maybe you can share where you had similarities. Maybe you can share some things you thought of that weren't on one of these two lists. Feel free to share examples, personal experiences, if you're comfortable with that. But go ahead and pause here and talk about also, after you talk about, compare your notes and what you wrote down, then talk about what's on this slide here and what you feel about that, what you think about that. What does it mean to you that unforgiveness is a burden and that forgiveness is letting that burden go? What does it mean to you that it's a release of debt, and how you feel about justice in regards to that? Maybe share experiences of how you struggle with the positive speech, that you try to forgive people, but then you find yourself, griping about them later on. So go ahead and pause here. This is going to be the bulk of the study right here, is discussing your thoughts and opinions and reflections on these things and sharing some experiences. When we come back to the video, I'm going to share with you assignment number 2, which is what you'll be doing over the next week. So assignment 2, I want you to pray daily for one person. So select one person, pray for every single day. And the reason is because I remember a long time ago, I met someone who was just a very happy person, had a happy personality. And she claimed that one thing that she did to help with this was force herself to smile, even if she didn't feel like it. And if she did this often enough, it could help change her mood. It could help bring her out of if she was experiencing sadness or anger. So this daily prayer for one person is going to help you develop a habit, and it's also going to help make it a little easier for you. That first time you pray is probably going to be difficult. If you don't want to start with a big offense, maybe you start with a smaller offense and see how, see from there. But pray every day for that person. And each time it'll get a little bit easier, a little bit easier. You're going to start developing a habit. So I also want you to read and reflect on the following verses. Be prepared to discuss them at next week's Bible study. Jot down your thoughts and reflections. Also, feel free to go back and finish answering any questions from earlier in these slides that maybe you didn't get a chance to finish, or maybe you had some afterthoughts on. Go ahead and jot down those notes. And I will see everyone again next week.